This morning we kicked off with some emerging trends in the advertising space and talked around some of the topical issues that are facing in the advertising arena. And then we kicked off into the second session, which was around more the art and science, so the creativity side of advertising and how we can see those now coming together in advertising platforms, which is really exciting and a bit of a game changer for us. But this final session now is more around more tangible things that you can do now, and how you can get going now, but also look into the future and prepare your business for the future and the kind of things to look out for. We flipped the agenda around a little bit. We're going to have the panel to begin with, which you can already see up on the top there. The panel to begin with, which they're going to discuss sort of future state and the types of things to prepare yourself for. Then we'll go into a case study, which is around sort of the journey to getting to sign a new contract with new advertising technology and how you kind of approach and go around your business to get stakeholders bought in. And then we'll have Greg, our head of product for global, to talk about future state in ad tech. So also, just to also give some context around the advertising cloud, because we're not really going into any piece around what is advertising cloud. Just to give you some perspective, we have a business that has 3 business units within it. So we have a search solution, search and social solution, a traditional digital demand-side platform business unit, and also now this new advertising cloud creative unit. And together, those are the most comprehensive suite of advertising solutions in one spot. And so you'll hear a lot through presentations today, and then when you kind of get us to come into your businesses around the benefits of that, but really having a holistic view of your audience, the ability to start to talk to that audience in a really meaningful way when you have search sitting alongside display and video, and to be able to look at what is performing well and why. You'll also hear from us a lot around really deep levels of not only cost but performance transparency, and in a really independent way. So we're able to access all of those advertising needs that you want in one unified platform, and we think that's pretty exciting. For those of you who are starting to engage with other parts of the Adobe business, more of the data products, we're really integrating with a lot of them too. So we're helping you extract value from your entire experience suite of solutions. So enough about that. I want to get this panel on board to kind of kick off, and I've been promised that it's going to be pretty exciting and they're going to go to places that allows for a really good debate. So welcome to the panel, hosted by Phil Colishaw, but we will have Rose Herceg, from the Chief Strategy Officer from WPP, Ben Kennedy, Managing Director for Interactive and Clemenger, Clare Smith from Village Roadshow. Sorry, I should have said Phil. Hello. Phil Colishaw heads up our business unit in the Australian and New Zealand market. Thank you.
Thanks, Sam. Everyone was a bit shy getting on stage today.
It's not like us.
I know. A bit nervous now. So before we get into questions, do you want to quickly introduce yourselves, tell something funny about yourself, sure. Maybe why we changed the order of the panel?
I knew you were going to say that for me. So hi, I'm Clare Smith. I work at Village Roadshow, specifically Roadshow Films, which is the distribution arm of the Village Roadshow Group, and I'm the reason why we had to change the order around, because I didn't look at the detail and booked an early flight. So sorry everybody who came to see the lovely Melissa, you're going to get us first.
My name's Ben Kidney, and my flight's at a fine time. I can stay till the end, and I guess I'm representing creative advertising agencies on this panel.
I'm Rose Herceg, the Chief Strategy Officer of WPP AUNZ. I'm a Sagittarius, I like walks on the beach. I don't know what you want me to say, Phil, but it sounds like one of those introductions on a dating service. But I think you'll get some very different opinions from us because we represent some very different parts of the marketing services business.
Perfect, thank you very much. Clare, I'll start with you.
Okay.
You're in an interesting position at Village Roadshow, obviously tight time frames. When you think about how consumers are reacting to advertising today, blanket messaging, the lack of really using loads of data to be able to personalise, do you think we're letting consumers down by serving and delivering non-personalised ads? And is that leading to things like the rejection of advertising, ad blocking, and various other
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think with the advent of data, there is a certain expectation that consumers have, that you know who they are, and if they've been to your site even a couple of times, the expectation is that you will serve up content or ads that represent what they've expressed interest in. And I think, you know, a recent stat I saw was 25% of Australians are using ad blocking technology on desktop and 2% are using it on mobile. And, you know, Google have just made it even easier to block ads, as has Apple and Safari 11. So, you know, I mean, there's definitely a rise of resentment from consumers, and I think also there has been a lot of crap advertising for a long, long time. No, there has, like those horrible, flashy, it's like the equivalent of, you know, the big flippy men outside the car salesman. It's literally the equivalent of that. And, you know, and we took a long time to clean up the web as far as those types of ads, and we let that type of digital graffiti basically live for too long. And so consumers are becoming really resentful and want a better experience. And I think that if you can personalize the experience, then they will be much more receptive to your ads. But when you land on sites and there's 17 messages on the page and you're just like, that's not what I came here for, you know, the shutters go up.
Yeah, so, I mean, that's interesting, right? 17 ads on sites, which I think we've all been there. And then you start to think about how publishers have to react to that. So people are blocking their ads, therefore they're not monetizing. Consumers often don't really think about the fact that the internet is free because of advertisers.
Absolutely.
Rose, what do you see? How do you see publishers changing their business model to help them to monetize their audiences?
So I think if publishers set a standard for creativity and had the guts to say, unless you pass a certain bar of quality control, I once heard Reed Hastings talking about how at Netflix, if they were to go into an ad revenue model, then it would be almost like you've got to pass a test to be on their air, which is kind of cool, right? So cool. I think that every story, every product, whether you are a washing detergent, whether you are a car, whether you are a tampon, whether you are a box of tissues, can be incredibly creative and entertaining. I honestly believe imagination is possible for everybody to do something great. So I think publishers should start to say, we want the ads for advertisers to be shown, and here are some strict parameters. It needs to entertain, it needs to tell a story, it needs to be charming, it needs to be funny, it needs to be something. I think that we could transform the industry if we had our publishers actually getting on our side as advertisers as well.
Ben.
I agree.
How will we step up from a creative perspective? Big task.
I think oftentimes you can show how adept you are to a platform or to a channel by what you don't do. Like, it's not necessarily like a box you have to tick. And I think the technology is probably ahead of a lot of marketers and a lot of advertisers. And so the experience, the strategy or the creativity actually is following the technology. And so just because you can do that, we are, but it's not necessarily resulting in a good experience or at its worst, you know, a rejection of advertising.
I mean, you look at Fairfax as one of the biggest publishers, and they actually started redesigning all of their sites because there was too much advertising, and they started to strip it down. To your point, Rose, you know, a higher standard is needed, especially on these massive mastheads that are getting so much traffic, and it's like they're doing a disservice by taking that type of advertising that's just rubbish.
And then thinking about, you know, it means that the clients are going to have to change the briefs to you. Ben, Claire, you're going to have to change the briefs. Then starting to think about, like, you kind of go with businesses and understanding, and you say it has to be entertaining. What I find funny is different to what Claire finds funny. So, Rose, what do you think about how do you interact with that and make sure that behind every data set, we say data incredible amounts of times in this industry, the fact is it's a person.
Well, look, there's humanity, and this industry of data has squeezed out every ounce of humanity and the human being that sits behind the data, you know, and it's kind of crazy. I think, you know, whether or not it's entertaining, as long as it's a great story well told, I think that's the point. Every product and every service has a story and a philosophy and a vision and a mission and all those other things that sit inside a brand onion. So if that's true of every brand, then there's an easy way to bring that story to life. And I think that we just have to remember that there is a human being with a life, with mess, with a job, with a relationship, with a breakdown, with probably emotional problems, with financial stresses, all the stuff that comes with being human, who is going to click on that ad or open up that whatever. And if you can figure that out and put that into the picture, you're going to do a lot better, I think.
All agree, I like it. I need you to disagree a little bit.
Well, you mentioned briefs, and that needs to be, that needs to be in the briefs. And I think, yeah, sure. But I think one thing that data enables us to do is actually not rely on briefs. And we should be looking at much more always-on frameworks. And so a calendar of activity that is always on, because our consumers are always on and they're multi-channel and multi-platform. But we should be looking at that data to what people are actually responding to, and then tailoring and optimizing our advertising accordingly.
I mean, I find the humanity part is great, and I absolutely agree with the humanity of it. It just becomes really difficult to manage on scale and en masse to really, get that personalized experience in, because I know for us, like, the data will only tell us 70% of the story. And I know for us personally, like, we introduced thumbs up, thumbs down on our emails because we wanted feedback. And there was all these things happening inside of our email programs that we had no idea why they were happening. The data was saying, people are not opening up this part, or they're not looking, and you're not getting scroll depth and all that type of stuff. And it was like, I don't know why, but the data was pointing to that. But it was only once we actually spoke to the consumer that we said, well, why are you not doing that? It's like, oh, well, because of X, Y, Z. So an example was, we had this full recommendation engine. You're always going to get caught out when you fake it. And it was like, movies recommended for you, and people were opting out completely from it. Sorry, I did what I was not meant to do. And then when we actually spoke to the consumers, they're like, you don't know me, I don't like those movies. They're completely wrong for what I like. But because we had said recommended for you, we kind of came a cropper on it, and we totally got caught out. So I feel like the data tells part of the story, but that's for us, the humanity in it is actually speaking to the consumers and actually hearing what they've got to say, because data for us is an indicator, it's not a solution.
But again, we talk about data points and data. Less is more in life, in relationships, in a job, in what you say at a dinner party when, God forbid, you've got some normal, crazy person sitting next to you who doesn't shut their mouth, and you just hope to God they stop talking. A bit like data. I think often, because we have the data, we think we have to do something with it. Sometimes the best course of action is to do nothing. There's nothing to be gained. Big deal, the person likes comedies. And so what? Just let it go. So I think we need a lot of better judgment about what to do with the data, if at all, to do anything. And organisations, like yours, Phil, might look to remind us all that doing something with the data isn't necessarily the right answer. And to your point, Ben, just don't have to always do something. You don't have to always try a new channel or try a new technology. Just stop and think about it, I think.
And when you think about this, and you think, we're talking about humans behind data points, we're making decisions using technology, whether or not to make a decision on that data point. And the fact that it is people behind that data, where does that data ownership sit? Is it with the technology delivering the ad? Is it the brand? Is it the consumer that should own the data, or the publisher?
I look forward to the day where people sell the rights to their data. It's about people, right? So I can't wait till some very smart person decides to come up with a business model to monetize me, Rose Herceg, as a single unit of data, and all the information that exists about me, my health, my money, my this, my that, and I can sell that to the highest bidder, the highest bank, or the telco. I think until people become aware of the value of their data and they themselves monetize it, that's the first time this industry is going to look at privacy really seriously and look at a lot of other things seriously. I think if the story is your story to tell, you should own it. I'm in the minority right now because most publishers just cringe at the thought. Banks cringe at the thought, but I think the individual needs to rise up and decide to own their own story.
I think it's a value exchange, and by rights, people should own their data. But if there's a value exchange taking place, then they're essentially leasing it they're leasing it to the brand or to the company or the publisher, until which time they're not getting value from that content, service or utility anymore, and then they should have the right to revoke their data.
And I think GDPR was really the first kind of movement in the market to actually put that ownership back into people's hands. I mean, I think that's an awesome concept, Rose, about, you know the value of what your information is. And I know from my perspective, if I wanted to get you, I would be happy to pay more because I know that you're going to be like a long-time customer for me and you're going to give me much more value rather than mucking around in really murky third-party data deals where, we don't do any third-party data deals because it's junk and we just don't buy it. Unless you can tell me what site this has come from, we don't buy it. And that's just our business policy. Yep. I'm not saying that's what everybody should do, but for us personally, we need to know the site reference has to be there and we need to know how you've collected it, whether it's authenticated or it's just scraped from advertising. And I think that, for GDPR to come in and for it to be the first kind of movement towards people taking back ownership of what advertisers know about you and what sites know about you and what publishers know about you, like it was horrifying for a lot of people to see exactly the depth of data and understanding that people had on you. So I think that's an amazing first stop. And I know for us, we've decided to just geo-block everybody out of the EU because we just can't comply with it and it's really difficult and it's onerous legislation, but it will arrive on our shores at some point. And so as marketers, as people in the industry, we have to be ready for what that looks like for us as businesses, and then also how we actually plan to deal with it. And I think it's definitely a great challenge to have, because the day that consumers fully understand how marketers are using their data, I think that will be better for everybody, and there's no duplicity and there's no murky practices happening.
So back to your point, Rose, putting a value on your own data means that there needs to be, and Claire, you said GDPR was the rise of people starting to understand that there is a value exchange taking place, and giving permission for people to use their data assets. As we go into a world where you're starting to see a rise of technology within the home, Amazon Alexa, Google Home, how do you see that kind of data exchange happening when they're starting to be, a lot more personal? It's not, I have given my data to a bank because I want a credit card, or I visited a website, therefore I'm considered some segment. It's inside your house, potentially listening. Yep. Potentially. Potentially? I don't know.
It totally is.
Correct. Where do you see that going? I mean, it's now in the house. Yep. The internet, data connections are now potentially like inside your family environment.
Well, the technology should be on the side of the consumer. So if you play this tape through to the end, Alexa, if it's in my home and I've used health measurements, it can figure out whether I'm healthy, unhealthy, my blood pressure, my hypertension levels, my iron levels. It should then start a conversation with me and say, hey Rose, for the low price of $5,000, we can parcel up your health data and sell it to every nutraceutical brand or whatever because it's really valuable. Do you want to do this, yes or no? So it should be a deal between me and that technology in my home that I own. Now that to me is a relationship I'd consider exploring. Right? Because if there's no right to privacy, or if we are saying that data is going to get collected, then I can do one of two things: opt out completely, which I would do because I'm not personally on social media. I don't tweet, I don't Facebook, and I'm not on Instagram because I don't want people to know what I had for breakfast yesterday and at which cafe. But if I'm going to go out, I opt out completely. Or if I'm all in and that particular technology can take every data point from the way I live, how I live, and everything else, then I and I alone should be able to set the price and sell it to the highest bidder like an auction, like a home at an auction. Now that is the ultimate end game of that, right? That's a very aggressive monetized version. But then you start to figure out what your data is worth. And if people aren't willing to pay $5,000, maybe they're willing to pay $4,500. But you get money back and you know what you've sold and you're all in, and there is no nefarious murkiness to this. This is very much out in the open.
You think you can use that to sell movie tickets, Claire?
Sure can. I mean, I think the only privacy that's really left is what's inside your head. Like, my Google Home clicks itself off constantly when the TV's on, and it'll say, I'm sorry, I didn't understand that. And you're just like, oh my God, that thing is listening like all the time. And, you know, I think there is a little bit of duplicity in there about how that is being used. And, you know, like my Google Cards are now really like uber personalized now because it's listening to what I'm watching in the house. It's listening to conversations that I'm having with my partner. And it's just all a little bit icky, you know. And I think that at some point there has to be a new set of privacy and a new set of legislation around voice products and around what it's actually listening for. And, you know, and I mean, we give up our privacy for convenience a lot of the time, hence like Facebook Connect and all those cookies that just keep logging me in. I don't want you to log me out because I don't want to have to remember passwords. So, you know, I think at some point there is going to be a nexus where people are going to be aware, they are going to understand the value, and they are actually going to take a stance and say, I don't want this anymore, and actually I value my privacy rather than my convenience.
And I think that is to the platform's best interest, because they're trying to optimize the experience for their users to keep you within that ecosystem, so you don't leave Google and go to Amazon. But if they get creepy with it, then you're going to do that. But there's quite a few. It's an interesting point because there's quite a few things that make that come to life. Like, and it makes, you know, the Internet of Things, for example, you know, fueled by data, making everything in your home or multiple things in your home a potential retail experience. And, you know, if as advertisers, you know, does that create another canvas for us to create on, or is it a potential thing that's going to try and block us because it doesn't think it's the optimal experience for their user? You know, for example, if my fridge is connected to the internet, it knows that I'm just about out of milk. I take the empty milk out and it says, you know, or it knows my bank account, how much I've got left. It knows don't have a lot of money. It's payday in a couple of days. Does it order me a home brand milk? Does it offer me a different milk? As an advertiser, do I say, you know, 9 out of 10 people who drink that milk actually prefer this one? You know, so I think it opens up interesting avenues to create on as well, and not always necessarily screen-based. I think voice is super interesting, and that'll be fueled by data. But obviously there's a responsibility to be responsible with it.
But see, the world that Ben just described to me is terrifying, because that is the very cornerstone of democracy. How dare a machine tell me what milk to buy? How dare a machine tell me how to live? There is no ethical, legislative conversation going on in this country with regard to the right to privacy. At what cost? Once things are not private in our country anymore, that's the end of democracy. We are a de facto totalitarian regime that tells me what kind of milk I should buy because there's only $4.50 in my bank account. That's a decision for me alone to make. Not a machine talking to Coles, talking to Woolworths to tell me what I can afford, right? So as much creatively and as data that sounds wonderful for marketers, I am terrified that there isn't a civil libertarian up here, that we're not having an ethical conversation about data, that we're not talking about privacy, for no other reason than you cannot get privacy back once it's gone. Yeah. Right? Once it's gone forever. And right now there's the My Health government health records, and whether you opt in or opt out. Health is a private matter. It's private. Employers should not know what the constituency of their organisation is in terms of their health. So I ask my fellow panellists how they feel about ethics and privacy and decision making and democracy, that data should tell me as a consumer what to purchase because they somehow know better, is the very fabric and foundation of a democratic nation. So let me know how you feel, because I'm getting interested up here and a little agitated.
Start pulling up the sleeves.
Not to detract from the seriousness of what Rose is saying, but firstly, whoops. And secondly, I think as terrifying as that might be, I think it's coming. I think that is the future.
It would have to be opt-in.
It should be
So
absolutely.
if the milk company's willing to pay for your data to be in your fridge, which is a weird concept, but I guess it is coming. Are you okay if I've opted in and Coles I opt into Coles and I allow them to look in my bank account and then select the milk for me?
Well, so another example to get off milk, but so Google I/O this year, the AI or assistant making a hairdressing appointment for their user. I'm sure everyone's seen that. I can so imagine that AI or that assistant doing it for their owner proactively. It would know what that user's calendar is, and would just go, yeah, you get a haircut every 6 weeks. Do you want me to go and do that? It's like,
those are innocuous examples, milk and hairdressing. Let's talk about voting rights. Does this AI technology and data say, Rose, we think that you will be voting for that individual who made that rather unhealthy speech on Tuesday in Parliament with regard to a white Australia policy, because the products that I buy in my supermarket might suggest that I'm more right-wing than left-wing. This is where this ends up. If you play these tapes through to the end, we have data casting my vote for me digitally because it somehow thinks that I am a subset of a right-wing extremist group based on the shopping basket. So I'm just making all of this up, but I'm not worried about milk and haircuts. I am worried about democracy, and I'm worried about voting rights, and I'm worried about civil liberties, and I'm worried about racial discrepancy, and I'm worried about all of the things that are happening in the United States of America that could happen here, that 40 years from now our children's children go, what were you thinking about talking about that panel in 2018 where you never thought about democracy, you talked about milk and haircuts?
Yeah.
That's my 2 cents.
I mean, look, you're not far wrong, right? You look at what happened in the American election. I cannot believe this is where this conversation's gone. But
Weirdly, I can.
We went off brief. But you look at what happened in America, right? And the corruption around Cambridge Analytica and how they were able to serve out content based on what people were liking and political persuasion and the fact that it just ran free. I get that, but I think the situation is that we're like frogs in water and we're boiling slowly. We won't notice when it happens until it's too late. This is what I mean about the convenience versus your privacy. People have given up their privacy over and over and over and over again. Like, Facebook Connect is one of the most insidious pieces of tech that's ever, oh God, I'm going to get in trouble, that's ever been developed, because it basically opened up your friends, your likes, everything that made you in a social profile. And people didn't understand it because it was like, oh, that's convenient. Yes, I'll use Facebook Connect to open up all of this. And we just handed over every single piece of privacy that sat on Facebook because we didn't understand. And so this constant giving up of things that we should hold dear, it's gone, and it's happening little by little.
Well, maybe that's the answer then. Maybe the answer is that we separate the innocuous, which is things that are useful and convenient, haircuts and milk, from the things that are actually inalienable rights, like democracy and voting and health and other records. So maybe there is a way to have the convenience for things that, frankly, what milk, who cares, to who I vote for at a federal government level, that matters. But I think that's the conversation that more of these panels should be having, because everything gets thrown in together and there is no separation between church and state. And I'm all for helping people make better sound choices and being convenient, but I'm also all for us having more of these rigorous conversations around the right to privacy and the right to democracy. Lucky Phil.
I love how everyone just looked at me. Thanks. Okay, I don't know where to go with from that. We are at time.
Lucky for you.
Lucky for me. So I'm going to try to summarise what we just spoke about, and you can let me know if you all agree or not. A future of advertising, less ads. The ability to...
Better ads.
Better ads.
Less ads. Better ads. One question I didn't get a chance to ask is are brands willing to pay more for better ads, more effective ads?
Yes, that day will come.
Thank you, Rose. That was a good answer.
Don't they do that at the Super Bowl at the moment? Like,
correct.
That's like it's already happening, and I think really there's the past few years, smart brands through creativity have actually hijacked the Super Bowl and gotten more bang for their buck so they're paying to play in that premium space, but then they're taking advantage of that with creativity. And
Absolutely.
for me it's both.
Contextual advertising, as you and I have discussed
Yes.
at length. You know, when the placement is right and when the audience is right, it might not marry out as a great cost per, but it's right because it's contextually right, and we always pay a premium for contextual.
Absolutely. And then the final one, consumers have a right to know what data we are sharing about them. They have a right to put a value on their own data assets. And we as marketers and, I guess, influencers don't necessarily have a right to assume or make decisions on behalf of consumers. Yet we can use the data to help persuade them. Was that good?
Yeah, that was very good. Well done.
Thank you.
Thank you, Phil.
Thanks, Phil.
Thanks for being such a good sport, Ben.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, that was interesting and no, it was wrapped up quite nicely, so thanks very much. Next up, we're going to have a bit of a case study, not a case study in the sense of necessarily using the advertising platform and what the results are. This client, Discovery Parks, is a very, very new client, is now just transitioning all digital media across into the platform. But I wanted to encourage Discovery Parks to get up on stage and talk about the journey that they went on this year and the discovery that they went on this year around knowing absolutely nothing around this business and but having a great ambition to really digitally transform themselves. Had a big, bold goal, future vision that's beyond sort of 2020, but looking at the things that they could do now. And so often, a lot of the times when we talk to customers, there's an existing go-to-market with media and advertising, and there's an existing agency partners and there are existing ways and processes that businesses are run. There's an existing infrastructure of how the team is set up. And this is a customer that kind of just disrupted all of that. And so I wanted, and personally I got involved very early on in this space, and we touched a lot of the different departments within the organisation. And I thought it was a really valuable way of just looking at how you go through the rigour within your business to understand the types of steps that you'd need to take. So I'd like to welcome to the stage, welcome to the stage Melissa Librandi, who's the CMO of Discovery Parks. Welcome. And I might also say that we were both determined to be as authentic as possible to tell this story. We didn't know each other in January, and now we're actually really, really great friends because we've been through a pretty interesting journey. But before we get into that, I wanted to get Melissa to explain what Discovery Parks was and what you do.
Sure, I can do that. And what I can also guarantee is, one, we'll run out of time because neither of us shut up. Second of all, we will not make way to anywhere where you or your panel just went, Phil.
Yeah.
Ours will be light and fun, I promise. So, Discovery Parks, we're actually part of the Discovery Group. So we have holiday parks, or what you might traditionally know as caravan parks, right across Australia. And they are in some of the most pristine beach lines and in some of the best locations in Australia. So I guess if you ask, but what is it that you actually do? Because a lot of people think we're theme parks, and we're not science parks. We offer a place where families and people of any kind of genre come and make and create memories that last a lifetime. And that in reality is what we do. We offer 80% of the population in Australia an opportunity to take a cost-effective holiday, not very far from home, so less within 300 kilometres of most of the time of where they live. And they get to enjoy beautiful, serene experiences in our parks. We have swimming pools, jumping pillows, play equipment, water parks. The industry itself has changed dramatically in the last 10 years, and that is largely due to the private sector investment in holiday parks. So as you can see from the screen, we have one brand, which is Discovery Parks, which we own and manage 67 parks across the country. They're the blue dots. Top Parks is a new park that we have acquired in the last 4 months, which now we have over 210 parks in that portfolio. So they're individually named parks, but they all belong to the licensed park network. And equally, we introduced a new brand called G'day Rewards, which is our new loyalty program, which sits right across both those brands. So hence now we segue seamlessly into the next slide.
No, but well, just before we go on to the next... just before we go to the next slide, can you just give a steer on just how big this industry is in Australia?
Oh, I'd love to. So you might be quite surprised to know that there is a brand new RV and caravan made every 5 minutes in a working week in this country. It is now the biggest source of manufacturing since we've had Holden's and Ford close down their manufacturing plants in Australia. And the industry itself is worth $20.5 billion to the Australian economy year on year and growing.
So that was a bit of an eye-opener for me. They must have some budget to do some advertising, which was really good. But before we get into that, I really want you, Melissa, to just describe a little bit about your job. So Melissa came from South Australian Tourism Commission and then recently joined the Discovery Parks business. What do you do?
Oh, yeah, well, I don't know. My boss is in the audience because he said, I'm coming to find out what it is you actually do. So it would seem, I'm not sure, but maybe I can articulate it a bit better for you.
Right.
So I did leave a highly sophisticated business and I did move to the caravan and camping industry. And it wasn't because I had to, it was because I wanted to, because I saw this mecca of opportunity in which the business that I was working for had already invested significant funds, and they're on a good trajectory growth track that looks something like this. We have in the last 12 months onboarded 57 staff. And so our business has grown, our head office has grown from what was 50 staff to 112. We're 1,600 staff Australia-wide. It's a really big business with a support office based in Adelaide, of which we are parochial South Australians are very proud of. So my job was basically to ensure that people who are visiting our parks understand 49% of Australians weren't born in Australia or don't have parents that were born in Australia. So not everyone has a nostalgic feeling to going to a caravan and or going on a caravan and camping holiday, like maybe some of you do in this room here right now. Most of the people that I see, and me included, is as a first generation Australian, I don't have this nostalgic feeling. So we're trying to talk to consumers right across the board in all different segments about how important it is to want to travel in a cost-effective way and a really affordable way. So I guess that's probably my key role.
Yeah, so you're a business that decided that early on, so toward the ends of last year, that you wanted to transform the organisation. So talk to me about digital transformation and why you made that journey and where you are in that.
So we, in essence, had 4 different agencies, 5 different marketing technology platforms, and we had lots of data and lots of reports. We really like using consultants. And so we had more decks than you could poke a stick at, sitting on, and I said decks, so sitting on desks, which just weren't being implemented because we didn't have the resource to have people go off and take this information and actually implement it. So our data was everywhere, Sam, and in all honesty, it was completely and utterly meaningless. One of the really important things to understand at the beginning of all of this is where your data sits, what it looks like, the taxonomy of it, and if any of it was actually of any value. From an advertising standpoint, the client was doing a lot of go-to-market that was just very traditional digital, I kind of call it. So there was actually no insight coming back from their advertising experience, and so that was a key point in moving forward. Yes, we did. We did outgrow our existing partnerships and our existing platforms. I now had 3 consumer brands that were in the same category with not a lot of differentiation between them. And so we had to understand how are we going to use marketing technology to actually target each consumer with the right brand at the right time. So one of the things you'll always hear is like, how do you get all of these siloed disciplines? So search was existing with one agency and one platform. There was social in another place. They might have been doing display and even media partnerships in silo. So one of the things that we really hit on was, you know, what benefit that has when you bring all of that together and you have a holistic view of your audience. And that leads into where you start to get your money to work harder. So Melissa now has 3 brands, but she has a very similar size budget. In fact, there was a bit more budget coming through from one of when the Top Parks brand was bought. But bringing everything together must have made sense for you. Yeah, absolutely. 1, it made sense, and 2, I don't know about you, but there aren't many times where CEOs walk around and go, marketing, have some more money. That never happens. But I was in the very unique place where they said, here, have some more money. And I went, whoa, okay. But then what I realised was the KPIs attached to that money were significant and they were hugely ambitious. But that was okay, because what I realised was if we disrupted ourselves and we went and found new technology, that we would be able to set ourselves up for success and absolutely give these ambitious targets a really red-hot go. Okay, so this is the meat of the presentation where we wanted to take you through the January to kind of now journey. And we're going to quickly go through and sort of talk to you about
what we both did and how we discovered. So there was a 2020 vision.
Yes. Ambitious growth targets to 2020 and to 2023.
Right. And it was through this that we started to, and through the information I've already shared with you, we just started to go through a very one-to-one, pretty much, education session. So Melissa had herself representing the marketing department. We had an IT person in the room that was sort of looking at the existing platforms and the existing business. And then there was a stakeholder from the board. So we didn't want to get a lot of people involved at this early stage before, because we wanted to make sure we concentrated the conversation and really understood the problems. So we went through some education, some understanding, and kind of left actually Adobe Advertising Cloud out of the picture and just looked at what was best practice. You know, what are you trying to achieve? Because at the moment, they've got individual campaigns running where there's going to be the duplication and overlap. They had everything in silo. So I just wanted to kind of talk through the benefits of actually having a more holistic view.
Yep, ROAS and transparency. So we were at the point where across the 3 different brands, because they were all using different technology stacks, I couldn't quite articulate, was it search? Was it a programmatic buy? Was it the display advertising? Was it the pre-roll? Was it the mid-roll? Was it because someone went to buy lunch and saw a billboard that was helping with our conversion points? So it was really hard for us to understand what we should be investing in. Where should I be putting these new amazing dollars that had appeared? Where should I be putting them?
So this is where we started to challenge what success looked like, right? So currently the marketing department was looking at a return on ad spend metric, but really had a lot of overlap in a lot of the disciplines that they were taking to market. So we really started to challenge a lot of that, and that's where we started to really build a lot of trust, because I was sort of acting more as an independent advisor, trying to get a lot of information in front of the team. And then what transpired from that was then the business decided that they wanted to introduce me to one of their media partners. So then I went and sat down with the publisher and I sort of said, what's your position and what sort of value are you offering to this client? That was important because that was a relationship that was important to the business. The relationship with the publisher was more than just media investment and media distribution. It was also content creation, and so that also played into this as well. And over time, and through this exercise, we started to build a really trusting relationship, and that's important because we started to build, you know, a circle of control and I guess the ability to talk to each other in a really meaningful way.
Sam liked when I asked him to speak to the publisher. He wasn't that excited when I asked if he could also speak to procurement.
Yeah.
So building the team.
Yeah.
So building the team was probably tricky because it was, if we onboard all of this technology, do I have the resources internally that even know how to use it? Who needs to be trained up? Where are all the gaps? And there were lots of gaps in a business that has grown 50%. 50% over the last 12 months. We had a lot of gaps to fill. So what I realised quickly was I probably had to think outside the box. So who else could I use to rally along my journey, and who else was going to help me build what needed to be a team, and who was going to help me also build a business case? And so at this point, I actually reached out to board members. I reached out to executive that weren't associated to marketing, and I even found colleagues and friends who were in other departments who were like, I get the journey you're talking about. I understand, and I can see where you want to go. Let me help you be part of it. And sure, we didn't all kind of articulate exactly what the Adobe Ad Cloud might look like moving forward, but what I had was all of these different people filtrating through my business and talking about something that I kept kind of banging a drum about, which I think was really helpful.
So then I convinced Melissa to come, or Melissa convinced the business to let her to come to Adobe Summit, which is in Vegas. And so this is our client.
Because that goes well, right? Hi, can I go on a conference to Vegas?
But this is important because this is actually a big client conference. It's a few days where we kind of deep dive into all of the Adobe suite. It's a lot like this, but on a much bigger scale. And it was through this event that we obviously had a concentrated amount of content that was feeding into the client. But we also had a lot of other clients that were in there and going through a really similar journey, and that was a pretty interesting point for you. Yeah, it was.
So I think what Summit did for me was potentially like what maybe you've seen today. There's a lot of information in a very short space of time, and what I found was it was great information, and you know the digital trends were amazing, and AI was great, and bots were awesome, but I couldn't even work out how I was going to get 3 brands to market in basic advertising. So that was all fantastic, but that was very futuristic for me. So what I found was some friends, and funnily enough, Clare Smith, who just spoke, became one of my friends. So I met her at Summit, and what she did was help me. She was already halfway through the journey. So she was saying, you realise that once this happens or once this happens, this will probably be the outcome. And so she really helped me understand what that actually meant. And probably most importantly, what I realised was it wasn't going to be hard work to swap platforms. A lot of the hard work actually happens on Sam's side and not on client side. And that made me very excited.
Yeah. One thing that is really important to take away, if you wanted to meet a customer, you wanted to meet a customer locally or globally, we have a really strong network of people in your industry, other businesses that are at the same time frame of you in terms of transforming. So it's something we do quite a lot of at Adobe. At Summit, though, we started to kick off the conversation around customer journey.
Yeah. So this was all about the infamous find the right customer in the right place at the right time with the right environment, and make sure you have the right message to them and to that segment. And that was really, if there was one thing I was trying to achieve out of this whole process, that was it. That's kind of like my pinnacle point. If I can get to that point in the next few months, then I know that I've absolutely nailed the last 9 months worth of work.
At this point, we then decided we'd broaden the conversation out to the whole team. So this is where we sort of went through all the benefits, an introduction to the Adobe Advertising Cloud, and then all the benefits that would come with it. What we didn't understand, though, was that actually was very disruptive to a lot of the people and individuals within the team. So we had to be pretty careful about sort of saying, your job's going to be a little bit different. The processes are going to change. And at this point, Melissa decided that she was going to change media agencies as well. And so that kind of changes, that change can be good, but it can also be a little bit confronting to a lot of individuals within the business.
Very disrupting.
The other part of the process is that it's really important is procurement. And in this instance, when the client is licensing the technology, it's really hard to sort of say, this is what your world looked like today with your agency, and this is what it's going to look like in the future, because there's a lot of stuff that the agency model was acting upon that just wasn't completely clear to someone like procurement. So we actually go right back to the very beginning and explain why the client was doing this type of thing and what kind of benefit it would bring to the business. The other conversation that flew out of this too was because the new agency process was going through market, it was another discussion around how do I position that agency relationship now? Is it going to be different to what it was in the past? And this is quite good because we had a willingness from the customer who wanted to really evolve every part of their business, even the way that they contract their partner businesses.
Very true. And so the procurement department that he's talking about, we're traditionally buying for us beds in cabins, washing machines for our laundry rooms, $1 million water parks. So procurement, then when I asked them to, hey, how will you evaluate an advertising cloud or a brand new digital agency or an agency model we'll move to? It was really kind of left of field for them. So it might not be so left field for your teams, but for us it was quite different. And so we were trying really hard to work out how was it that I was going to value this investment that I was putting in. And what happened, because I did have quite a few brands that I was bringing into one, it meant that I was going from 6-ish agencies into one. And so the cost effectiveness of that ended up actually being about a 5% saving to the business overall. And I think that would probably surprise most people, that having efficiencies in your agencies and bringing them all together into one place actually can be a cost saving and far less time consuming on your end as a client.
So that bleeds into how you built the business case.
Yes, so be brave, be brave, be brave, because almost every step of while you're trying to build a business case, someone will tell you to stop doing what you're doing. What you've got is probably good enough. Let's just keep going, push, push. And you have to be brave and go, no, I'm going to disrupt myself. I'm going to disrupt my team because there is a better way we could do business. And for some people in the audience today, you might have set up the business or the way you're actually conducting business right now. So it's pretty tricky to go and disrupt yourself. Or more importantly, what you're doing is future-proofing the business, and you don't or may not even intend to be in the business in 12 months' time. But I think that part was most important. So whilst you're building the case, find people, those same people that I found earlier on, came back, helped me out, and we did build a really strong case as to why we should disrupt ourselves and move forward in this direction.
We kind of partnered a little bit on that too, so we knew that the business case
Don't tell them I called you every second night at 10 p.m.
That's what happened. So we knew that we had to present a case to the board, and so I built a kind of a relationship with the board as well. But we kind of really thrashed out the things that we thought were going to be interesting to the board, or that were really going to resonate with the board. And that was definitely a collective kind of approach. I mean, Melissa did all the hard work, but I was just a sounding board really for that.
You're a good sounding board, thank you.
So then we signed the contract, and then we onboarded. And so this is basically where we're going through the whole process now. This is actually like technically going into search accounts, technically looking at what's in market at the moment and transitioning all those campaigns into one centralised platform. It's also part of how we start to extract value. But in this instance, there was also another agency in the picture as well, which is great. So that means that agency and client are together, and then Adobe's sort of helping consult, advise, and make sure there's no technical difficulties and we're technically sound in how we go to market.
True.
And that's ongoing. So there's Phil and his team have an ongoing relationship with the agency and with the client to make sure that we're really challenging the status quo. I guess we set up simply in the beginning, and then we start to really test and evolve and start to get better outcomes. So, short term.
Short term. Yep. Process and people, that was probably the hardest part, and then identifying people's roles and responsibilities. So we were working in a very traditional way. We were now moving to a new digital platform, new digital agency, working with the same offline agency. So we had a lot of people to bring together that needed to understand our journey and where we were going. The data plan was probably, I think, most importantly, who owns it, what are you doing with it, is it useful? And I think that's where Sam and the team at Adobe really helped us understand what our data plan should look like. So we are not going to get into the data discussion that the panel were having, but more just very basic data about the segments of your customers, what you need to know about them, how can you market to them better. Aligned to all targets. Everyone in our agency and in our entire business understands what our targets are. So if you're in IT, if you're in finance, if you're in operations, if you're in marketing or even P&C, everyone understands that we have ambitious growth targets for online, we have ambitious growth targets for our G'day Rewards membership loyalty program, and we have ambitious targets to onboard more licensed parks. So everyone understands exactly what it is that we are heading to. So sure, you know, that's segmented down into other areas and actions, but overall everyone understands the goal and where we're all headed to. And you have to continue to invest in your brand. That's an absolute no-brainer. You can't just kind of swap everything over into one portfolio or into one MarTech and then think, that's it, I've done enough, I can move forward. You have to keep reinvesting in the brand so you still are top of mind and filling the top of the funnel.
And then longer term, I guess, when you set up that foundation for the short term that Melissa just described, the insight and the data that you're getting from your marketing and your advertising should start to actually really bleed into how you build the strategy. And the marketing department then moves away from being more of a cost center to more of an intelligence hub. And so that intelligence hub can help to actually drive and influence other parts of the business. And so that's kind of where we sort of think that it's going to go. Obviously, it's really early days, but we're pretty excited by it. So finally wrapping up, what are the final three things that you reckon these guys should take away with them?
It's okay to start over. It's okay to disrupt yourself. Disrupt yourself before someone else does. You know, the taxi industry knew Uber were coming and they didn't do anything about it. So disrupt yourself, because then you've got the edge and you can take it in the direction that you want to. The next one would be find a friend. Find my Clare or find your own Clare. But find a friend and find someone else who's along this journey. Remember that probably 80% of the people in this audience are probably sitting in a similar space to where you are. Some are maybe reaping the rewards, some are already on the journey, and some haven't even worked out they've got a problem. But most importantly, find a friend and get on the journey together. And start your future right now. Don't wait for a green light. So if you're trying to implement a new CRM or a new CMS or any other acronym that you can think of in a technology space, don't wait for everything to line up together and then hit the green button. Hit the green button as you know what you need. I knew I needed new digital marketing technology and ad technology, so I've hit the green light on that. And everything else can follow on as it needs to. But if you're waiting for one big green light, you are going to be idle for a very long time. I can guarantee those stars are never going to align.
Melissa, thank you very much for sharing your story.
My pleasure.
That was awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, now we're going to wrap up with the final presentation, which is from Greg Collison, who is the head of product for us for the Advertising Cloud globally. Hopefully you'll find his future state on the ad tech world an inspiration.
Thanks, Sam. So I know what you're thinking. You're wondering, how did this guy get the last slot in the last session on the last day? I think that's the wrong way to think about it, guys. Let me frame it differently. I think we should talk about it like this from here on out. I think we should say that Shantanu opened Symposium and Greg Collison shut it down. Right? So when you talk about this, when you tell your friends, when I tell my wife how it went, that's the way I'm going to frame it. So do me a favor. Let's keep that going. Again, I'm Greg Collison. I run the product team for the Advertising Cloud. And I'm just going to spend a few minutes talking a little bit about our vision and strategy for the platform. And I think this is the right place to start because if you've been involved in the keynotes or anything else, you've seen us say over and over again that Adobe is in the experience business. And more specifically, we want to enable marketers to create compelling experiences with their customers, right? And we know that advertising is often the first touch point that a brand has with their customers. And so it's important that we shift the mindset in advertising away from just delivering exposures to really creating positive experiences, whether they're first impressions or ongoing conversations. And if we're not careful, advertising can feel more like this, right? I think Clare said we do a lot of crap advertising. And the reality is that can happen, right? Marketing done wrong is annoying. We know that oversaturating an audience with a generic message for a product that is not relevant is just noise, right? And so the question that we ask ourselves and our customers are asking themselves is how do we get it right? And I think what we've seen is to solve for better experiences, marketers have been moving towards what we call integrated marketing stacks, right? Because good marketing is not about doing one thing right, it's about doing 1,000 things right. It's creative, it's media, it's audience, it's identity, it's data, it's all of those things working together for a common purpose. And so the question that marketers are always asking is how do I find partners or platforms that help stitch that kind of stuff together to create those positive experiences. So as a result, what we've seen is that this is a fairly typical marketer's tech stack. We know that the average marketer uses somewhere between 3 and 4 different buying platforms, sort of adopting a best-of-breed approach to the technology they use based on what inventory or audience data is most relevant for the campaign. So for example, if your audience is on social, you buy through Facebook. If you want to use online purchase data, you're going to start going to Amazon. If you want to activate against open or private exchange deals, you're going to go through a DSP, right? And that makes a ton of sense, but what we're hearing over and over and over again is there is sort of a challenge that this creates, which is that the platforms are siloed, right? And I think Clare talked about that, but when you really want to look across the full campaign, the full buy, and understand how you're delivering, how you're engaging, how you're activating your audience, it's hard in a world in which all those platforms are siloed. Now the Advertising Cloud, which is the product that I run from a product team perspective, we're in a sort of a unique position because we both have a DSP, but we also have integrations into all of the walled gardens. So if you think about how the Ad Cloud fits into a picture like this, it changes it slightly, which is to say, you know, one, we are deeply integrated with the rest of the Experience Cloud solutions. So if you have any of those products like Analytics or Audience Manager, it means that we can activate your data seamlessly, we can feed sort of your data from advertising back into your source of truth, so that's really helpful. So that integration across the Experience Cloud matters. We have that strong DSP capability so we can activate an open and private exchange, but again, the neat thing is we have integrations into those walled gardens, which enables us to add a layer of value above and beyond what they do in isolation. So things like deploying audience, setting budgets, surfacing insights, or even optimization. And so that is sort of a unique space for us, and one that generally excites marketers. They always ask, well, how do you do it, right? But I think the concept is really exciting. And so to explain the how, this page is sort of helpful, right? And the headline is that when you think about the portfolio of solutions, there is a solution to help a marketer manage every step within the customer journey. So for example, if you're building audiences, you can use Audience Manager. That data can flow seamlessly into the Ad Cloud, which makes it really easy to activate that audience in paid media, right? Find the most efficient pockets of media to reach your audience. We now have a creative product that helps serve personalized messages through the advertising experience. And if your customer clicks on the ad and goes to your website, we have products to personalize that experience, right? So you can create that consistent or personalized experience throughout all of those touch points with a customer, right? And you've got analytics underpinning the whole thing, so you have consistent unified measurement across the solution, right? So that's kind of like the full end-to-end story that we talk about within the Experience Cloud. And it generally resonates, again, so that's sort of how it works. So then, to take it up a level, these are those same 5 principles, right? And what we would say is that when we think about the future of advertising, it feels like these are things that marketers should practice and apply to really create those great experiences with customers. And not surprisingly, within the Advertising Cloud, we're investing in each of these capabilities so that we can help, right? And so I'll spend just a few minutes to talk a little bit about how we're investing to make this stuff really real and more effective as you engage with your customers, okay? So the place I always start is with data, and again, there's some heated conversations around data, and I probably won't touch on all of those, but I think the key is we know that if you want to be data-driven, if you want to create those personalized experiences, you need to know your customers, right? And you can be judicious with how you use the data or what data you use, but you shouldn't not use it because you haven't invested to collect it, right? And so one thing that was mentioned in the keynote yesterday was this idea of a data platform. And hopefully that made sense, but this is an investment we're making across all of the Experience Cloud solutions. It's not just Ad Cloud, but it's a single data layer that powers all of those solutions. And at the heart of it, there's this thing called a unified profile. And the idea is that unified profile stores a record of all of the consumers that a brand has interacted with. And for those consumers, we store all the touch points that the brand has had, right across your advertising, your on-site, your in-app, your email, so that you have the single source of truth and you can remember all the point conversations you've had with your customer, right? And that's a pretty powerful concept, right? It's really hard to stitch together that data, but when you have it, it's the foundation for things like rich segmentation, deep insight, and I would even argue optimization, right? Because that is the type of data you want to train your models against. So that for us is kind of the first piece, which is just we're investing in data through this data platform that underpins all of the Experience Cloud solutions. The second thing for us is to help you activate that data in media. And here we have 2 goals. 1, we want to give you full control over the buy. And 2, we want to make it really easy. So today, you can already plan, buy, measure, and optimize on all screens and formats in the platform. It's good. We've got massive inventory scale. It's super easy to bring on your private deals. That's good. And within each channel, you've got a ton of controls around things like sites and geos, brand safety. So we have all the functionality. I would say we can check that box. The hard part, though, is really how do we make it easy? And that matters a lot because what we've seen is that as the sophistication around kind of programmatic ad buying has increased, the amount of time it takes to set that stuff up in the platform has really skyrocketed, right? So in an extreme case, we've seen marketers set up thousands of placements in the system for a single campaign. And so even when you have really great templates and bulk tools, that takes a ton of time, right? We know we can do better. So our goal is to make it really, really easy. So you'll tell us all about your targeting parameters in the platform. We'll ask you some questions about what level you want to manage budget and optimize across. And we'll automatically create all of the underlying placements or portfolios for you so that it's much, much easier to get going. You spend less time in the platform and more time solving for customers. So I'd say there's a usability piece there that we're investing in. The third thing for us is around creative. And again, if you saw some of the keynotes, we demoed our new Ad Cloud Creative product. Same thing that we're talking about here. I'd say the principles are, 1, it's connected to the Creative Cloud at large. So it's really, really easy to bring in your creative assets and use them for building ads. 2, we can help you deliver the right message to each customer based on everything you know about them, right? So whether it's rules-based decision trees or dynamic creative, you can deliver a personalized message through your advertising. And 3, there's real-time insights. So you always know which creatives are working, which ones aren't working, so you can take action and either overweight the ones that are working or tweak the ones that aren't. Right? So creative's a big deal for us. This product launched in March, and so far the results have been really positive. Customers are excited about it. MGM is a big brand that's really adopted it because they've got this really complex portfolio. Right? 21 brands, 75 countries, with a bunch of audience segments for each. And so again, they're having a lot of conversations with customers. And after using this tool, they saw some really encouraging results. I think it's something like 27% lift in engagement and 30% lift in revenue. So there is value in personalizing the message. And again, we're trying to help customers figure out how we do that well. We talked about the fact that marketers use a lot of platforms, right? And that creates silos in the data, which is really frustrating and difficult to make sense of. We want to help solve that problem. We really see two big opportunities here. The first is just a consolidated view of all your spend across all your channels. It sounds so basic, but I know it's really hard to get today. So that, I think, is table stakes. The next big thing for us, though, is surfacing the relationship between the money you spend in each of those channels. So if you're running a brand campaign across digital video, CTV, and audio, yes, we should show aggregate reach and frequency, but we really want to get to the next level where we're surfacing unique reach per channel, right? Cost per unique reach per channel, so you can understand how those pieces interact with each other, and the same thing on the performance side of the business. Because we think if we produce insights like this, it helps smart people make better decisions. But again, it is also the foundation for the way we do machine learning and optimization within the platform, right? Because it's the same data set that you're going to use from an automated decisioning perspective. And at the moment, you hear us talk a lot about Sensei at large within Adobe. I think what you need to know from an ad cloud perspective is that we have Sensei running within our channels right now, so it helps make good decisions within channels. But I think the next big opportunity is to make better decisions across those channels. So either from a spend recommendation up front, or as you're actually executing in your live across a number of channels, letting the system look at which channels are performing best and shift budget to the ones that are really working and maybe take spend away from those that aren't. So I think there's some neat opportunities for us to help, again, optimize across what had previously been a bunch of silo channels in a way that makes a difference for the outcomes that you're trying to drive through your advertising. So that's it. Not too hard, right? 5 simple things. Unlock the power of data, activate audience, personalize your creative, surface insights, and raise the bar through optimization. I'm sure we'll have that done in just a couple of weeks. Shouldn't be too hard. But again, we feel like this is the right set of things for us to invest in with the goal of helping our customers, the marketers, engage in those compelling experiences with customers. So that's what we're after. We're going to keep working on it, and we'd be excited to partner with you guys as we go through the journey. So that's it for me. Greg Collison shut it down, and I think Sam's going to say 1 or 2 things to close.
No, I just want to say thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone. If there's any questions, please just come up the front and say hi. Enjoy your day. Thanks a lot.